Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 143. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Craig Detweiler. Craig is president of the cultural investment organization, the Wedgwood Circle, and dean of the College of Arts and Media at Grand Canyon University. He has written multiple screenplays and directed the award-winning documentary Remand. His acclaimed books include iGods, How Technology Shapes Our Spiritual and Social Lives, Selfies, Searching for the Image of God in a Digital Age, Deep Focus, Film and Theology in Dialogue, and his new book, Honest Creativity, Focused in a Time of AI. Craig has been featured on ABC's Nightline, CNN, Fox, NPR, and in the New York Times, as well as the Wall Street Journal. Variety honored him as their 2016 Mentor of the Year. Craig, so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Naftali. That was very gracious. I'm exhausted just thinking about all of that.
Well, I was exhausted just reading that, and I hope I didn't stumble too many times there.
No, you were great.
There was so much to get to, so we will unpack. We have time for that. But first, give us, I guess, your launching point here, your backstory, how you got to where you are, and a brief description of what you would say. There's so much in what I read in the bio. So how would you describe what you do, on a daily basis?
I would say I am, at my core, I'm a storyteller. I grew up in the American South with parents who were from the North. And so I've got Pennsylvania roots in the background, but grew up in Southern culture that, was hot, steamy. People would like to sit around on porches with iced tea, maybe something stronger, and just unpack the day. And so I've been doing that kind of work, both as a writer in books as well as screenplays. But I don't think I was necessarily, I didn't grow up, I'd say, a strong English major or anything like that. It was something that I had to learn and had to practice. And I appreciate what you do as a coach of helping people tap into what is strongest and possible within them. I learned at Davidson College in North Carolina as an undergrad. I actually chose to major in English because it was my worst subject. And I said, well, if I'm here to get an education, I want to try to take something I'm bad at and turn it into something I'm good at. And so it's been fun to master, or at least attempt to master, things that potentially scared or intimidated me.
That is so interesting because when I think of, typically speaking, as a former educator myself, so I'm well aware of the fact that there are a lot of issues with school and with education and how we try to make sure that kids are really good at a wide range of things. And I often feel that we're doing them a disservice because we all have inclinations, abilities, interests, etc. And so trying to make me, let's say, for example, really good at math, if I know that I'm not going to be pursuing math in a meaningful way on a career level, seems to be a waste of time when I could be utilizing that time, let's say, for something else, which is more in line with how I see my future. And you might make the argument as a child, you don't know the difference. And so it takes some time to get there. But eventually, whether it's high school, college, one should have that sense. And of course, on the college level, you really can drill down in your areas of interest. But you said something about kind of identifying a weakness or an area of disinterest and saying, well, if I'm here anyway, I may as well shore up and kind of go deeper in this area that I'm not particularly strong at, which I think, to me at least, runs counterintuitive for many people. I mean, most people would say, well, let's say, for example, your strong subject was math. I'm just going to make that up, right? They would say, oh, well, I'll pursue a career in engineering or another career that typically would lean heavily on those math skills. And that's where you would develop them. And you would say, you know, writing's really not my gig. I'll write it if I need to, but for the most part, it's not part of what I want to see for myself in my future. So what triggered you to move in that opposite direction, kind of like lean into your quote unquote weakness? And in retrospect, do you think that was the right decision for you?
That's a great question. I guess I viewed education as something that was trying to make me well-rounded so that I could be multifaceted, so I could shift with the marketplace, wherever that might be, and have skills that translated into a lot of different settings. And so even for yourself, you know, having been an educator and then moving into leadership and coaching, they're related, but they're different, right? You're working with different populations, different age groups. And I think I like that ability to wear different hats and try different things. Maybe it came out of boredom, where I thought if I major too much on one thing, I'll get sick of it. You know, even in high school, I could maybe say, well, that was good for an hour, hour and a half. I don't know if I want to do that all day. And so I think that that multifaceted ability, which um, it's harder when you're applying to a job or when you're trying to position yourself, you know, with someone that they may want to pigeonhole you into a particular field or particular skill. But I think as you and I've seen over our lifetime, the way that business changes, the way that the marketplace changes, you have to be able to change. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to be adaptable to a variety of settings, because none of us could have predicted how,
Yeah.
you know, tech heavy life would become.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question that is germane to the moment, a little bit politically inclined, although I'm not encouraging that a political response at all. But it is the context in which we're having this conversation, since you did talk about leadership and you are a dean of a college campus and you see what's going on nationally and perhaps even internationally on college campuses. I'm not asking you to weigh in on the Israel, Hamas, all of that, but I am curious to get your take as a dean when you're dealing with something that is atypical, certainly this level of agitation. On the one hand, you have this value, let's call it freedom of speech. On the other hand, you have clearly some malintent going on in many areas. As a leader, what is your process as minimally, I don't know how that's relevant on your particular campus, but as you're looking at it nationally, for example, what goes through your mind as to what would be the appropriate response? Let's say you were sitting in the seat over at Columbia University, NYU, any of these schools. What would be your approach to, on the one hand, wanting to give a platform for students who have, you know, assuming that they're students, in many cases that's not even the case, but let's go with that piece of it for the moment.
Indeed.
How does a leader approach a situation, especially when you have your own views and your own feelings, because you're a person, you're not like a separate stone where you're completely disconnected from the issue that they're agitating over. How do you manage that, on the one hand, giving them the space to say what they want to say, and simultaneously figuring out what's in the best interest of the institution and just the general higher learning agenda, so to speak?
Well, the question's near and dear to my heart. I have a son and a daughter who are each students. They're on these college campuses where there are tents and protests, and they're going to class and, you know, have friends who are maybe on the mall or on the square, inviting them to join, you know, camp out, become part of things. So it's not a theoretical question at all. As an educator, almost all the time, I want to try to look for the teachable moment. That's the job, is sort of to recognize, are people in a position to hear, to listen, and to grow? There are many times when I think this isn't a teachable moment. People aren't listening, they aren't hearing, and they're not necessarily willing to grow. And those get hard. So then it's like, how do you invite people into a different space, more of an open posture, as the open hand as opposed to the closed fist. I've been impressed by the leadership of the president of my son's college, Williams College. The president there, she is a Jewish historian focused on the Holocaust, and yet she resisted even 6, 8 months ago making some strong statements about the situation. And I think it cost her a fair amount, right? As a leader, there's always high cost when there's high stakes. And yet you still have to make a decision. And what she said is that my job is actually education, it's actually not politics. So she was trying to retain a listening environment on her campus, even though clearly she had strong feelings undoubtedly about the situation, but she didn't think that's my job. My job isn't to express my feelings, to make statements, and to jump into political phrase. My job is to create a learning environment where everyone can interact and be respected, be safe, and flourish. The president at USC, also a woman. This is University of Southern California, where my daughter is a student. As the protests grew larger and more heated on their campus, the police were called in. It got very ugly very fast. They did discover a lot of outside people who were not students, who were central to that gathering. And so then you say, well, this is a little bit disingenuous, right? This is not just a student movement, right? This is something else. What she said in retrospect that she regretted recently was not going out herself and talking to the students before the police were called in. Could she have approached them with, donuts and cookies and just said, I'm here and let's talk? And I think as a leader, that is maybe the first gesture that you want to give is yourself, to show up and just say, I'm ready, I'm willing to enter into the situation. I'm directly in front of you. There are no screens. There are no filters. This isn't a statement. I'm not releasing something on email. I want to hear from you and allow you to hear from me. And that, because that exchange didn't happen, because others kind of intermediated, everything got exacerbated. And it can be risky, right, to put yourself on the line to enter into a tense situation, but that is what leadership calls for. And so I appreciated her already rethinking some of her decision making and admitting that even publicly that quickly, which is also another form of leadership.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, without going too deep into it, of the book that I've read. I don't know if I've read in its entirety because of the density of the book, but it's Leadership Without Easy Answers by Ronald Heifetz. Oftentimes leadership isn't about just having a solution or just expressing an opinion. Oftentimes it is creating environments for the different sides to fully develop their position and to start to see where the other is coming from, and to create almost like I think he calls it not a safe space, which I'm not a big fan of anyway, but a holding space, like a place where you could allow tensions to develop further without getting out of hand, and then creating a situation where either the solution presents itself obviously, or then you step in as a leader and make certain definitive decisions that move the process in a particular direction. I do love the idea of being a listening ear. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the conflict, I'm not sure how much that practically would have done, but minimally, I think the fact that you demonstrate a willingness to be present. Part of the issue, I think, with these college presidents and deans that they're getting a lot of flack for is they seem to be hiding in their proverbial ivory tower. It's not clear that they're doing anything, or if they are, there's a certain, let's call it, smugness that comes across, and people feel like when you are disconnected and arrogant and all of that, and you have people who are suffering as a result of your poor leadership, then you have to go. You're just not the right person for the position, and it's just unfortunate that so many institutions of higher learning, especially prestigious ones, the ones that everybody knows,
Yes.
are being led by people who really do not. I mean, this is the classic case of bad leadership. If I were to give a
Mm-hmm.
class in what do we not want to see from our leaders today,
Mm-hmm.
you just take them through the list.
Yep.
MIT, Penn, all of these schools, Harvard, Columbia, like literally a train wreck, one after another. And it's the schools that have more principled leadership, the
Mm-hmm.
schools that are more focused on, number one, what are our core responsibilities? Well, obviously
Mm-hmm.
the safety of all of our students, right? We
Mm-hmm.
believe in an open dialogue. We don't believe in shutting people down because they don't believe what we believe, right? That's not what higher education has become in many instances, which is a shame.
Yeah.
I have um, two master's degrees and a doctorate. And I think it was only afterwards that I've really started to be not so optimistic about
Mm.
higher education, because I see, number one, you could do really, really well for yourself without, I don't want to go into that as a topic, go really well for yourself being very focused and not necessarily doing the whole college thing, but the indoctrination and some of the other pieces that are going on, it just really throws into question, what are we after here? What do we need as a society? I think we have to think about that and think about how society is affecting us and changing us. And so I do want to move into your books.
Mm.
I'm very curious about it because you talked before about how you kind of transitioned into writing, which I imagine was some of the foundational skills that ultimately allowed you to be the author that you've become. But you haven't just chosen to write about, let's call it, generic topics, even
Mm.
leadership or things like
Mm.
that, which everybody can listen to and look at and say, okay, nice ideas. You make a good argument, whatever it is. You got into some areas that some people might say, I wouldn't call it taboo, but some areas that people would say are not in um the common conversation that people are
Mm.
having at social events and things like that. And so when we
Right.
read, like, for example, going back to the titles here, iGods, right? How technology shapes our spiritual and social lives. So
Mm.
I'm thinking back to, almost, it's not the same point, but the famous Atlantic article of is Google making us stupid, and sort of like asking
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, what are the benefits of technology? What are their
Yes.
drawbacks? And specifically in the area of God, of religion, of theology, right? You have a book, Selfies, Searching for the Image of God in a Digital Age. I mean, these are the only
Mm.
these are questions people ask when, number one, typically I would imagine, number one, they themselves have a religious
Mm.
foundation. They
Sure.
are religiously connected, they're spiritually connected, and they're wondering about, what is this technology doing to me and to my future, both
Mm-hmm.
as a parent, as a community member, as a leader, and being a part of the Orthodox Jewish community. Our community struggles tremendously with this, because on the one
Mm.
hand, the technology is there. You want to be able to leverage it. You want to be able to live, so to speak, in the 21st century and have the tools to be successful. On the other hand, I don't need to tell you, besides for all the fundamental challenges that open exposure provides, technologically and otherwise, the issue of just, having a brain and being able to remember something and
Mm.
being able to think outside of whatever is you're flipping through and scrolling through on your feed, and actually being able to connect to something bigger that technology could never replace. So I'm curious to know, number one, what moved you along that path? Like, why
Mm.
did you choose these topics? And number two, what have you learned
Mm.
mainly by
Mm-hmm.
by going deeper into some of these areas?
Well, I think the role of technology, the power of technology, in a sense, snuck up on all of us. I don't think uh, when computers were rolled out, we realized how much time we'd be spending in front of them. I think we thought they'd be doing more work and we'd be doing less. And as it turns out, it's like, no, I'm actually kind of tethered to this box. And then same thing. In theory, the phone was supposed to free us. I can talk on the phone anywhere. I could be anywhere. We didn't really think, oh, wait, that thing is going to make me accountable. I'm going to be on vacation and still answering email. I'm going to be reachable, whenever I'm trying to be away. Um, so a lot of times we don't realize the effects until they arrive or after they've arrived. So for me, it was catching up as an educator, as a parent, and saying, I'm not sure this is a good thing. It didn't come with an owner's manual necessarily. And so to hand it even to our kids at, 10, 12, even 14, and just say, have at it, kids, hope it goes well. Well, that seems irresponsible as a parent, particularly when they're in this time of life where they're being shaped and as far as who they are. They're wondering their value, they're wondering their place in the world. And to then say, now put yourself out there and people will comment on how you look or how you feel. That's a terrible thing to do to a young person. And so the pressure of Instagram, to present this perfect version of yourself, really hard at a time when you're like, I have braces and acne and I just feel weird about even my body. And now I'm supposed to put it out there for public comment. That's just a terrible, terrible thing to do to a young person. What have I learned? I think I've actually learned, or I'm hoping to help others rediscover the power of Sabbath, the importance of taking a break. You talked about the scrolling and how we can get into this cycle where it's the first thing in the morning we turn on. It's setting an agenda and saying, okay, here's what matters today. Here's what's in the news. And it's the last thing we see at night before we turn it off. I don't really want my day to be dictated by what, in a sense, I would call the iGods, right? The social media icons, whether it's Facebook or the platform formerly known as Twitter. I don't necessarily want to set my agenda based on that. And so can I interrupt these things that literally are called disruptive technology? How do I retain my own power by being willing to turn it off, put it down, put it away, take a break, reset, refocus, and remember, who I am and whose I am.
Wow. So going a little bit deeper there, because I think we focus on the challenges of technology, certainly, and the fact that oftentimes we feel trapped by it and in a variety of ways. But let's talk about spirituality, because I think that that's an area also that might go into the taboo camp a little bit today, unfortunately. And I think that maybe in our quest to be modern, to be humanistic in certain levels. So the concept of spirituality, especially as it relates to organized religion, has taken a hit. And I'm not here to propose that everybody now all of a sudden, go into a theology class or things of that nature. But what I'm wondering is, what advice would you give to somebody who feels that, I'm so caught up in my technology, I'm so caught up in things that just seem, as I take a step back, so petty and insignificant. How can I become more spiritual, and more intentionally spiritual in my life?
I think it is a question of deciding our own values that may be independent from a technologist's values. In the book iGods, I talk about the values of efficiency, doing things as fast as possible, and so many metaphors where we assign to ourselves, where we say, "Oh, that class was a big download," or "I'm still processing." We start to dehumanize ourselves through the process and taking on language of technology to describe ourselves. And then we do the other thing where we're assigning, in a sense, a certain kind of brain or intelligence. If you think about even the word artificial intelligence, we're saying, that brain, that computer has a brain. Well, no, it doesn't. It's a computer. It has a microprocessor. It can process information. But then we start to do it and say, well, my job is to process information. And again, we start to forget, well, maybe my job is to live and to love and to serve and to be present to, those in my life, to be present in my community. It's very easy to forget that when you are being told that you are actually an information processor. Here comes the email, you need to respond to it. And that is what your work is. I think when people realize that maybe 30-40% of their job was responding to email, they were like, this isn't what I signed up for. I don't think that's what I was made to do. I was made to, be a teacher, be a nurse, you know, uh, build a house, work with my hands. And so I think young people, uh, to a large degree, there's an interest in kind of trades. A lot of people want to get back to even the physicality of life. I want to be a baker. Can I be an artist? All of those things, I think, are a way of reclaiming our humanity, which is a deeply spiritual act, fundamental to
Okay,
who we
yeah,
are.
I do love that reclaiming of humanity in particular. It's so important. But let's take a few minutes before we wrap up this segment. I do want you to be able to talk a little bit about honest creativity specifically, which I know is written in the context of reclaiming humanity, I guess you would say, in an AI world, and how to be creative and how to retain the humanity or the human aspects of that. So why don't you unpack a little bit, what was the impetus for writing the book, and what have you discovered along the way?
Well, I think a lot of, as an educator, I see students, young people who are a bit intimidated by technology, feel like it's going to take their jobs. If you think about the mastery that's required in music, the years of practice, and then you see that a computer can, compose a symphony in the style of Mozart within seconds, and you're like, this is problematic. I don't know what to do with this. So I'm trying to help people to overcome their fears and even lean into those fears and say, you know what, fear is something that a computer doesn't know anything about. Love is something that a computer doesn't really have any experience in either. So those hopes, those fears, those disappointments, as well as our aspirational side, right? So what are our honest fears? What are our honest aspirations? And even what are our honest limitations? Can we make these strengths? Can we say that the fact that I can't do anything and everything, does that make me better? The fact that I get tired, is that potentially a strength? Can I write about what it means to be weary, what it means to struggle, to be discouraged? That's what the experience, right? I mean, the one of the oldest works of literature, the book of Job, right, is about all of these ultimate questions of suffering and struggle and questions of doubt. Well, all of those things, that's what makes good art. It makes good literature. It creates our sacred texts. It is those fundamental questions that if we reclaim them, I think that will actually be our key to tapping into, our HI, right? Our human intelligence, our human ingenuity, our human imagination, which I'm confident that HI will endure in the age of AI.
So let's one last question, I guess, before I have a different final question for the segment, but the question I
Sure.
wanted to ask you, just as a follow-up, practically, I mean, that sounds really nice and comforting, but if you're advising students, especially in the creative space, who are concerned about their future and where AI is going, and the ability to still maintain employment and an opportunity, how are you advising students differently, if at all, today than, let's say, 5 years ago?
Mm. Well, I think we all have to recognize it will become an additional tool, right? And something you need to be conversant with. I think it's great at iteration. It's great at idea generation. But once it gives you, a first example of, is this what you're looking for? And you prompt it and try to go further. I think it's going to be a frustrating game to just continue to prompt the engine towards something. So you have to have your own sense of aesthetics, your own sense of art, and your own idea of what it is you want to say. So a machine may approximate it. It might be good for starting, but I'm not sure it's going to be good for finishing. And so it's that extra part that we add, right? So it's AI plus HI. It's that combination in the same way that it is when we have, a computer, when we have a pen, paper, that's a means of expression. but it still has to come through our own brain, our own soul, and our own experience. So I'd say, yes, figure out and understand HI. Do not fear HI, and instead figure out how to master it and make it work for you rather than you working for it.
Yeah, that's nice. Making it work for you. And I think that's an important consideration. So, talking about making it work for you, let's talk about a mistake. We all make them. What would you say, Craig, was the biggest mistake that you made work for you in terms of learning from it and helping propel you further in your career?
I think, as a student, you'll often assign maybe too much power to a teacher or a parent who can discourage your creativity, who can say, nah, don't waste your time. I think that's a bad idea. I think too many times I doubted my own creative impulse. Even up at USC Film School, there were stories I wanted to tell, and the initial feedback I got it was discouraging the entire idea. And I shut down and I was like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't. And that process of self-doubt, of self-sabotage, right? It's a very tricky thing for young people and even for leaders at the highest level.
Yeah.
And so I think the mistake was not trusting my instincts, not trusting kind of that calling or that idea that was bubbling up within me. And allowing others to stuff it down and making me give up too quickly, too soon. And so I think
Wow.
the book for me, Honest Creativity, is a way to say, no, you press on,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the face of doubts, in the face of fears, in the face of those who say, that's a bad idea. No, that's your
Yeah.
idea. So go with it, please.
Nice. Okay, we're now going to transition to rapid fire. Other than me, an author you'd very much like to meet, since we've already met.
I was a huge fan of Toni Morrison. Just love her courage, creativity, depth.
Nice. An app or tool to become more spiritually connected.
What, say that again? An app?
An app or a tool. So anything that
Yeah,
you know that allows people to
yeah.
connect spiritually.
There's something called Hallow, which is created by the Catholic community. That's like a daily update, little nuggets of wisdom.
Nice. The best part of living in California outside of the weather, and also one thing you'd like to see change.
I love the diversity of California. I love that there is a different kind of food on every street corner, and I can travel the world. What I love to change is probably the depth of inequality, how hard it is to afford to live in that sunshine.
Yeah. Something that everyone should know about AI.
It is it's a computer, not a person. It's
Yeah,
an app.
you made that point very powerfully before.
Yeah.
A quote that you live by or think about often.
I love Flannery O'Connor, and she, as a Southern author, dealt with strangeness and stuff. She said, to the hard of hearing, you shout, and for the almost blind, you draw large and startling figures. And I feel like that's the moment we're in as a culture, where to communicate, you got to do some very creative, strange, and interesting things to cut through the
Just
clutter.
to stand out.
Yep.
I wasn't going to include this, but since you mentioned that your parents are Northerners, you're a Southerner, and you're living in California, what are your favorite sports teams?
I go back to Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh Steelers,
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh Pirates. That's my family roots.
Got it. So Steelers, Rams, you'd be going Steelers.
Yep.
Got
Yep.
it. Okay.
Old loyalties.
A productivity tip that helps you to get more done.
Do it the first time as soon as you get it, right? Make the move on it, right? Don't say I'll save that email for later. No, just do it right now. Just get it out of the way and keep moving.
Okay, so Craig, you've shared a lot. There's so much more we could have unpacked had time permitted. How can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Well, I may at times decry social media. I'm still available on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, the format formerly known as Twitter. I'm in all of those places, and I'm very happy to interact in those ways. I see what my work as the beginning of a conversation, and
Awesome.
Have therefore enjoyed this kind of conversation as well that we've
As
had
have I.
today.
As have I. And I'm sad to have to wrap it up, but before we do, please leave us, Craig, with one final life lesson.
I would simply say, fear not. You are gifted. You are powerful. You are wonderfully made and have massive potential within you. And I want to
Wow.
see it.
Okay. So everyone has their homework. Okay. Well, fantastic. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for rising early for our conversation. I know you started early California time, but it was well worth it for me at least. And so I
Likewise.
appreciate all that you're doing, and certainly look forward to seeing all of your additional content come to market. I know there's a need for it, and thank you for drawing attention to such important areas.
Well, thank you so much. Cheers.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.